To those of you joining us today, thank you for watching the Woburn Spotlight. I'm your host, Tyler Gates, here to bring you some positivity by talking to those in town, making big strides for the greater good. Today I'm extremely fortunate to have with me Darryn Remillard, who is running for state representative of the 30th District here in Middlesex. Darryn, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me here.
I'm excited to hear a little bit about you and your story. We've talked a few minutes prior to today's show, but for our viewers that are new to Darryn, and new to the show, tell us a little bit about you and what you're here to talk about today.
Awesome. Well, I'm a husband, a father, U.S. Marine Corps veteran, a veterinarian, and a Democrat, and I'm running for the 30th Middlesex District. I got into this race because I've helped a lot of friends of mine who are local politicians in different municipalities around Massachusetts. And after 8 years of serving in the Marine Corps, I thought I was done with public service. I thought I'd put in my time. I was just ready to, get back to life, being a good citizen. But in helping a lot of my friends win re-election or win election, I kept running into too many people who were apathetic. And I actually had people ask me, why do you even bother doing this crap? And that really bothered me. And obviously in the aftermath of the 2016 election, I think that really jarred a lot of people's attention, for better or for worse. But our campaign is fundamentally about, striving for a better democracy, right? A democracy we can all be proud of, thriving communities and healthy families. And I try not to delve into the nuances or the abstractions of politics. Whenever I talk with voters, we just have these casual, organic conversations about me, and I try to tie together all of the things. Everyone thinks, oh, politicians are about this or they're about that. And I always go back to, nope, I'm about a better democracy, thriving communities, and healthy families. So that's what our campaign's about.
Keeping it simple to those three cores. Simple, maybe a poor choice of words.
Yeah.
Simple in theory.
Yeah.
Difficult in practice.
Approachable.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
So you have a lot on your plate. Sounds like you know what you want out of the campaign and what you want to bring to the table for the Woburn and Reading districts or areas. But yeah, let's take a step back. What interested you? Because politics, like you said, it wasn't maybe top of mind. So you saw a lot of your friends in the industry. Is that what got you into politics? Was politics in your life at a young age? Do you mind just touching on that?
Yeah.
Where it all began? Was it?
Yeah. I don't know that it was at a young age. I mean, I've tried to be involved whenever I can, right? Whether that's writing letters to state reps, state senators, that's something I take seriously. I've done that a lot. But I really didn't envision, 10 years after finishing my Marine Corps service in 2008, that I'd be here running for a fairly prominent political seat. But I'm happy to be doing it, and I realize that my job as a veterinarian, it requires me to be a listener and really leave my own personality out of that. And I hope that's something I really bring to the table. So,
listening, huh? One of the strengths that you have, it sounds.
Yeah, this is a listening job.
I can only imagine, right?
Yeah.
So you're meeting a lot of people. I know out of a candidate, it sounds like listening has been a common theme of strength. What are some of your strengths? I'd love to touch on that for a minute, Darryn.
Listening was not always my strength. My wife and I invested a lot of money for me to become a better listener, right, through veterinary school debt. I would say just being disciplined and focused. I grew up as a foster kid. I grew up in poverty. And, I got to where I am, because of the GI Bill and, government programs like that. But I wouldn't have gotten to where I am if I didn't actually channel, ambition. So I think, my core strength is I'm a very disciplined person. I try to outline, what it is that I'm after, and then go for it. And in this job, right, you have to bring those two together. You have to be a good listener. You have to go out and listen to a lot of viewpoints. I also think you have to be bold. You have to let voters know what it is that you're trying to do for them. And be really detailed, be meticulous. So that's another Marine Corps strength, by the way. They really drill it into you. Be assertive, be bold, be meticulous. And don't be afraid to be held accountable.
So in your journey so far, have there been moments of surprise? I know the campaign is new to you altogether, and probably a completely different lifestyle from where you were 6 months ago, 9 months ago, 12 months ago. What surprised you? What's been unique to you, and where are maybe some opportunities for you to grow moving forward?
Yeah. What's really stood out to me the most is my assumptions getting challenged.
Yeah.
You know, I'm a liberal and a progressive, and that's not something I shy away from or run away from when I talk to voters. But I've had some of the most fascinating conversations with people who don't necessarily agree with me on a lot of issues, but then we end up talking about the things we do agree about. That's actually really encouraging.
Yeah.
Right? I feel like we're treading water, wallowing in this environment that feels hopeless for a lot of people. I actually feel a lot more optimistic, having been at this for close to 9 months now. So, right, whether we win or lose, it's great to walk away with a sense of optimism.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely, and it sounds like you've learned a lot in this journey. Like you said, win or lose, you have that optimism. Really what I would love to hear, because you don't have as much of maybe the political background, what are some of your experiences? I know the Marine Corps especially and the veterinary school, but do you mind touching upon some of your experiences and how they'll help you moving forward in this career change?
Yeah. Less my Marine Corps experience, but really more my veterinarian experience.
Yeah, let's stay there for a second.
You know, again, that's a job that, you know, if you're not a good listener, you shouldn't be a veterinarian. I would say if you're not a good listener, you shouldn't be a politician. Now, we do have a lot of politicians who are maybe not good listeners. They're good showmen, good showwomen. But outside of veterinary medicine, right, I've been involved with organized veterinary medicine, so right, that requires you to delve into policy, you know, look at issues like how we invest in higher education, where we're getting it wrong, how we might be able to get it right. Here in Woburn, I've been involved with a little local citizens group called Woburn Welcomes.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, there's I think a lot of misinformation about what we were aiming for. I grew up in Mexico, and we all realize that we have a lot of undocumented immigrants in Woburn. And our aim has been, right, when we banded together 2 years ago, to really try to foster positive dialogue about the role of immigrants in the community here. All of these other labels aside, right, legal, illegal, we're trying to really take the negative emotions out of it, because we looked around and we realized we're not really sure that, you know, people are really advocating for this community. So, right, while I haven't been in elected office, I think what really sets me apart is, one, I have a lot of really specific ideas that are based upon my experience with other medical professionals, veterinary professionals. They're rooted in my background. I also have a Master's of Science degree in biotechnology, so it's also rooted in that background as well. And then some of the more recent work that I've sort of dabbled in as an engaged citizen, if you will. I'm
really curious to ask this next one, because I think it ties in, and I appreciate the unique approach to how you look at your experiences, and I too agree that the way you share it, it sheds some light on what you could be as a leader. What would you tell voters or future voters what they should be asking, or let me rephrase it, what should future voters or voters be asking of their future leadership in these upcoming elections?
Yeah, good question. This is a pet peeve of mine.
Okay.
As someone who's written to state representatives and state senators, I really want people to not be afraid to hold their elected officials accountable on really specific action items. We don't just get elected, we may speak in generalities, we may speak in aspirational language about what we're for, what we're against. I want to hear a lot more elected officials, especially in our day and age, when my worry is a lot of people have a really negative view about government. And one way to get a really positive view about government is people are specific and they're not afraid to tell voters, hold me accountable if I don't get these things done. I'll put myself out there in front of you. I will tell you exactly what I want to fight for, and we'll have a discussion when it comes time for re-election or whenever about why I didn't get it done, what stood in the way. So again, for me, that ties back to be bold, be specific, be detailed, and it shows voters that you've actually taken the time to research and learn about a lot of complex, nuanced issues. So yeah.
That sums it up. Be bold, huh? Be bold, be meticulous, and I think that goes back to, like you said earlier,
and don't be afraid to be held accountable. Right.
So, on that point, I'd be curious, what are some of the, you said be bold. Some of the policies, some of the passion projects that bring you to this seat and that make you want to essentially run for candidacy. What are some of those core values that you know that you're carrying with throughout this journey, and some of those policies that you're going to be spearheading?
Sure. I think we have to acknowledge we're at a point now where a lot of the policy that people want to see happen may not get done at the federal or national level. One thing that's near and dear to me is helping out my fellow, post 9/11 military veterans. So to be specific just for a moment, we have throughout the United States several 100,000 military veterans who are dealing with post-traumatic stress disorder. And when they were in the military, they screwed up, right? They came home while they were on leave after a combat deployment and they smoked a joint. And that showed they popped positive on a drug test. The military has a very, very harsh legal system when it comes to a zero tolerance policy with drugs. That's all well and fine. The issue is here we are 10 years later and going forward, and these are the veterans you see who are outside holding up the sign saying, I'm homeless, right? I need money. And so 95% of their service was admirable, commendable. These are young women and men who were deployed into harm's way. They had to kill people on behalf of their country. That's really emotionally horrifying stuff to have to go through. And at the national level, there are senators, there are members of Congress who have been lobbying to do something for those hundreds of thousands of veterans. Keep in mind, these are people who, they didn't get dishonorable discharges. They got bad conduct discharges. They fall under this umbrella of bad papers discharges. And because of this one monumentally poor decision that they made, they have this scarlet letter for life. And it locks them out of benefits at the VA Medical Center, the GI Bill, getting their first home mortgage guaranteed by the VA. They don't have those benefits. And so something that Connecticut did recently was they passed state legislation to restore some of those benefits to veterans who have diagnosed post-traumatic stress disorder or who were victims of sexual violence while in the military. These are groups of people who are at a risk for PTSD. I think we can do that here in Massachusetts. I think this should be done at the national level. I'm not holding my breath, though. I don't think it's going to happen. So that's one thing I'm really specific on. We've got this great legislative template, and I've been in discussions with legislative leaders in Connecticut who want to see this get expanded. The people who push for this in Connecticut, they think it's great. There's a model here for it to be passed on a state-by-state level. And then maybe after we get it passed in 10, 15, 20 states, we'll get it passed at the national level. So that's one thing. Firearms violence is something that matters a lot to me as a dad. I have a 3-year-old daughter. And while cases of school shootings are horrific and they capture our attention, again, I grew up just outside of DC. And in the early 90s, DC was ground zero. It was the murder capital of the US. It still has a shockingly high violence rate. So having been a gun owner and having used just about every firearm that you can imagine, what really bothers me is the lax culture behind firearm safety and safe storage of firearms. We really don't have effective legislation that holds gun owners accountable when they fail to live up to their expectation, right? If this right matters this much to you, your fellow citizens should expect that you secure firearms properly. Some of the most heartbreaking stories are a toddler gets a hold of a firearm that's laying out and about and injures themselves or someone else. I think here in Massachusetts we have really effective firearm safety laws, so I don't worry about mass school shootings with AR-15s and assault rifles. That's a very divisive term, and it actually obscures any productive debate that we could have. What I worry about here in Massachusetts is a child gets a hold of a shotgun or a semi-automatic handgun that's not properly secured, and then they take that to a school. We don't have very many laws to deal with that possibility. And that's what actually played out at Santa Fe High School in Texas. It wasn't an assault rifle. Those were firearms that a disturbed young man got from his father. They weren't properly secured. And as a consequence of that, 15 or so of his fellow classmates were killed. So that's my second item. More broad issues. I want us to have a fair tax system here in Massachusetts.
We'll spend a few moments there.
Please do. And so this is where I encourage all voters, whether you are against higher taxes or you are for higher taxes. Most voters, because I've been talking to them, they want the crumbling roads to get fixed. They want schools to be properly funded. They want the MBTA to run on time. They want it to not break down every 10 minutes when you're trying to get into Boston. So I headed into Boston this morning. I had a brief meeting. I tried to get on the Orange Line. One, the lot's full and the trains are really unpredictable. So I ended up driving in and parking. That shouldn't have happened. The way that we fix all of these issues, we need to have a really frank discussion about what's the cost of living in a good society, right? And that's the trick question. What's the cost of living in a good society? Taxes, right? And so we lost out on the Fair Share Amendment. It would have imposed an additional 4% income on anything over $1 million. It would not have affected the overwhelming majority of voters. It was phrased poorly. I think that was the consensus of the state Supreme Court, and therefore, it couldn't be put on the ballot.
Yeah.
I am a proponent for a graduated progressive income tax. It would see income taxes lowered for the overwhelming majority of workers, right? Anyone who makes $50,000 or less per year, their income tax would go from 5% down to 4%. But after that, we're talking about $250,000 tax brackets. And what is far more logical is to have for each $250,000 bracket, you have an additional 1% on income in that range, right? So it's a graduated, stepwise income tax system. We have huge investments that we have to make in the next 10 years, upgrading dilapidated water infrastructure in gateway cities like Lowell, Lawrence. Here in Woburn, we're actually really fortunate. We've had those investments made. We're not going to fix our MBTA without having serious discussions about taxes, and we're not going to be able to make higher education affordable if we don't talk about higher taxes. So that's one that I'm not afraid to run away from it. Every voter needs to ask, especially of Democrats, do you support higher taxes? And if you do, how would you approach it in a way that's fair and balanced and wouldn't hurt poor and middle income earners? So
that's a great question.
hopefully that's specific, but that's my idea of specific.
No, I think two very specific early on, and your broad terms I think are specific in nature for most. So I appreciate you spending a little bit of time there.
Sure.
So I guess what's the first push? I know you have a couple of things that you're passionate about that I'm sure will carry through with you in your entire career. Where out of those two, three things do you see us needing to spend the most time early on?
Yeah, so I think the real question there is what can get passed quickly without expending a lot of political capital, right? It should not be challenging to quickly build consensus for helping out veterans in Massachusetts. It is actually far cheaper. One of my favorite authors is a Belmont native, Sebastian Younger. He wrote a lot of books about the struggles that veterans face coming back into society, especially after experiencing war. If you want to help a veteran, don't thank them. Get them a good job. And so it's actually a lot cheaper to give these veterans some measure of dignity back in their lives so they can get back on their feet, get benefits and services that they need, so they can get back to living a dignified life, right? And get a good job and get the benefits needed to have a stable, secure lifestyle. I plan on moving on that really quickly.
Okay.
We have veterans in the Mass State House. I think that we'll be able to build consensus on that quickly. Where I think we're going to face more challenges is on this thorny issue of taxes. And it all goes back to that. That's how we fix our busted up roads here in Woburn and Reading. It's how we make sure our trains run on time. And those are the discussions we have to have about the long-term investments that we've all been talking about for years, and we never seem to really make enough progress.
So it sounds like you want to be a listener. If somebody is watching today and says, I like what Darryn has to say, how do they get a hold of you? What are some of the next events that you have? Do you want to spend a moment just there for a second?
Sure. If you want to get a hold of me, please email me, Darryn, D-A-R-R-Y-N, at darrynremillard.org, DARRYNREMILLARD.org. I'm very responsive. I will get back to you within a day at the most. We will have more events coming up. I think we're going to have a house meet and greet event in Reading in the near future. We're seeing if we can have an event in August, either at the VFW Hall here in Woburn or the American Foreign Legion Hall over in Reading, to be determined. But we'd like to do that. We're out and about all the time, right? So we'll be out, right? We've done coffee shop events, getting out, meeting voters. But it's summertime, it's hot. People are away on the weekend, they're down on the Cape. So I get it, right? This may not be the first thing on people's minds. So that's why I can't emphasize it enough. Shoot me an email, whether you agree with me or not. I'm all about engaging with voters, and especially, right, having my assumptions challenged. So.
All right, wonderful. Well,
Yeah.
thank you for spending some time today.
Thank you.
I want to give you the floor for a moment
Yep.
and ask the generic question, Darryn, that you can answer for our viewers today.
Yeah.
Why vote for you?
Yeah. So I would love the opportunity to earn your vote. We're in a moment right now where I think we really suffer from a lack of idealism. We have 4 great Democratic candidates in this race and 1 Republican candidate. What sets me apart is I'm willing to go out and make the arguments for things like higher taxes, why we should make childcare affordable for most of our families here in Massachusetts, why we really should have a single-payer universal health care system and how we're going to get there. We didn't get to talk about that today, but I've been having this discussion with voters each time I knock doors, and as I like to tell voters, there's a reason Uncle Sam doesn't use our healthcare system and uses Medicare for all. We call it TRICARE in the Marine Corps and in the military. I'm an unconventional candidate. For me, running for this seat is a step into unfamiliarity and being uncomfortable with something new. But again, as they say in the Marines, get comfortable with being uncomfortable. I think we need unconventional candidates who are willing to bring just a new vision and are not afraid to make new arguments that we have to have here in our state. So I hope that you give me some consideration. We're going to fight for your vote. We've knocked about 2,000 doors so far. We're planning on knocking at least 5,000 doors. It's really invigorating to get out there and hear what voters have to say, for better or for worse. So yeah.
All right, Darryn, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
And best of luck to you out there.
Appreciate it.
Look forward to seeing what you can do.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
And thank you all for joining us for today's show with Darryn Remillard, running for state representative here in the Middlesex 30th District. Remember, we all have one life to live. Let's all do our part. I'm your host, Tyler Gates. Join us again next time for another episode of the Woburn Spotlight.